It's really been a while since I did any recordings, and I apologize for that. I know I left you all hanging. A little bit of a cliffhanger. So let's get started reading a bit more of The Golden Bowl. We're going to start with chapter 15, The Assignment. Entering the workshop, Zephyr put down 2 bowls of lentil and barley soup for the midday meal. Her eyes opened wide when she saw the lapis beads with tiny yellow flecks embedded in them. "These blue stones look like small fragments of the starry night sky," she said, putting out a hand as if to touch them. Then her face flushed, and she bounded out of the room. Sita sat down at the table. "Your sister speaks like a poet." To Jomar, Zephyr's tense, quick movements made her seem like someone with a guilty secret. "She's always making up songs," he said, trying to keep his voice light. "Is this what you mean about being a poet?" Sita nodded. "Her words make you see things in a new way. In spite of what's happened, I want to hear her songs played on the temple lyre before she goes." In spite of what happened. This was proof that Sita believed Zephyr had taken the bead. After their meal was finished, Sita rose and took the drinking straw down from a shelf. "Tomorrow you and I will start working on the lyre. But I want you to deliver this to the High Priestess today." Jomar was startled. "I'm to go alone?" Sita's expression was somber. "I have work to do." Jomar suspected he was being tested. How could he prove to Sita that he'd made the delivery to the High Priestess? Sita wrapped the drinking straw in a length of cotton cloth and tied it with a braided strip of leather. The end of the leather strip had been inserted into a lump of clay, on which a small design had been impressed. Jomar touched it. "Why is this bit of clay here?" Sita picked up a small cylinder of black stone and showed it to Jomar. "I used this seal to press the design into a moist square of clay." Jomar had to look intently to see the design carved on the little stone scroll. "Oh, it's people drinking beer through long straws." "It is," Sita said. "I've made many gold straws for the temple, so I decided to make that little scene my mark, my symbol." He gave the wrapped package to Jomar. "Walk quickly to the temple. Don't call attention to yourself. Temple staff and craftsmen are allowed to use the back entrance." "But I'm not really a craftsman," Jomar said. "Will they let me in?" "Show the guard my seal so he'll know I sent you," Sita said. "Ask where the chambers of the High Priestess are located. Bitatis is powerful and proud. Show her every deference in your gesture and speech. When your task is completed, return home immediately." Home. Did Sita truly accept him as part of his household? Jomar saw that Sita was waiting for his response. "I'll do as you say." But his thoughts were in such a jumble that he had to think hard to remember what Sita had told him. He left the house with the package tucked under his arm. Zephyr was coming toward him carrying a mesh bag filled with fruits and vegetables. In spite of the drought, the temple managed to feed its staff well, Jomar thought resentfully. With a start, he realized that now he was one of those working for the temple. Nari walked behind Zephyr, unburdened. Her eyes darted to the package that Jomar held. "What are you carrying? Where are you going?" "Sita is sending me to deliver the drinking straw to the High Priestess," Jomar said. "Too trusting too soon," she muttered, sweeping past him into the house. Jomar glared at her back, then started off toward the temple. He started to achieve a relaxed stride and a carefree expression, but the long package was awkward and soon drew unwelcome attention. A boy about his own age came out of the house next door and came up to Jomar. Falling in step with him, the boy casually tossed a ball made from an inflated animal bladder from hand to hand. "You must be the goldsmith's new apprentice," he said. "I am," Jomar said, increasing his pace. The boy walked faster to keep up. "My name is Gamil. The goldsmith's son, Aban, was my closest friend." He cleared his throat, but the next words came out in a whisper. "I miss him." He shook his head and hurried on. "Aban was so proud of the work he did on the pieces made in his father's workshop." Jomar wanted no part of a conversation that could compare his poor skills with Aban's. He shifted the drinking straw to his other arm and looked straight ahead. "I'm sure Aban was well trained and talented." Gamil pointed to the package. "I know that Sita doesn't permit anything to leave the workshop that isn't finished, so you must be taking something to the temple, probably something wonderful. Am I right?" Why did he want to know? Hadn't Sita warned him to be wary of city people? "I have a delivery to make and no time to talk." Gamil's shoulders fell, and he dropped back. Free of Gamil, Jomar abandoned his effort to appear competent and in control. He grasped his package firmly and hurried on with his head down. Nearing the back of the temple, he stopped short to avoid running into a tall man with a protruding stomach, who seemed to have deliberately put himself in his way. Jomar looked up. Malik. The lips of the temple official were twisted into the same superior half-smile that Jomar loathed. "Ah, the farm boy. I've been looking for you. Didn't you say you would be apprenticing with a goldsmith named Sita?" Malik reached out and grasped Jomar's free arm. "You must be carrying something valuable." "Let me be," Jomar said. "I have business to conduct in the temple." Malik exerted more pressure. "Such a responsible job for one who ran away from his responsibilities." Jomar tried to appear confident. "I'm not your slave," he said, and instantly regretted using that word. "You're not, but your sister is," Malik said. "She's not only a slave, but something more serious, a runaway slave. Do you know the penalties slaves receive for escaping?" Jomar thought of Katnu's wounds, and his stomach twisted into a knot. "I'm sure they're severe." "Oh, yes." Malik's grip dug into Jomar's arm. "Branding, flogging, and worse. I, too, am on my way to the temple to receive my next assignment. I'll find out where your goldsmith lives, and soon come calling. I'm sure he'll be interested in knowing more about his new apprentice and his young sister." Malik flung open the back door of the temple and disappeared. Only the task that Sita had given him prevented Jomar from sliding into a numbing despair. Chapter 16. In Bitatis' Chamber. Jomar waited outside the temple until he was sure Malik was occupied receiving his next assignment. He secured his package and opened the temple door. He looked around nervously. Malik was not there. Jomar entered a vast and peaceful space. The whitewashed ceiling and walls were broken up by shadows cast by columns and jutting buttresses that supported the clay brick structure. Jomar found some relief from his troubles in the cool, quiet sanctuary. This serenity was disturbed when a man stepped forward. "What's your business here?" Jomar knew he must turn all his attention to his assignment. "With your permission, I'm to deliver this to the High Priestess Bitati," Jomar said, holding out his package for inspection. The man fingered the seal. "Ah, you're fortunate to have been chosen as Sita's new apprentice. Go outside and enter by the front of the temple, because the chambers of the High Priestess are located there. A young handmaiden guards her door." His face grew grave, and he shook his finger in warning. "Once inside her chambers, do not linger after your delivery has been completed." Jomar nodded. He walked outside and entered the great temple through the imposing double doors. Inside he passed dozens of rooms, and through open doors he caught glimpses of courtyards and rooms behind rooms. Finally he came upon a young woman who stood in front of a carved wooden door. A simple necklace of one lapis bead hugged her throat. He thought of Zepha. Jomar held up his package to the handmaiden. "The High Priestess Bitati waits for this. The goldsmith Sita has instructed me to give it to your mistress." The young woman smiled. "I'll lead you to her." Jomar followed her into a room filled with light and patterns. Woven textiles with strong geometric designs covered the walls and floor. Then he saw a woman so still that he thought for a moment that she was a statue. She was seated on a high-backed wooden chair embellished with inlaid shell. The legs of the chair were carved to look like those of a lion. The high priestess had the self-assured stare of a lioness at rest. Bitati's gown was made of tasseled sheepskin that left one shoulder bare, but it was her jewelry that astonished him. Large gold earrings, shaped like crescent moons, hung to her shoulders. Gold leaves wreathed her head, similar to the ones in the necklace he was stringing. Had Sita also made this dazzling jewelry? Bitatis's only movement was the impatient drumming of her fingers on the arm of her chair. Jomar bowed and handed her the package. "I bring you this from the goldsmith Sida." The high priestess unwrapped the parcel and examined the drinking straw carefully, then lightly touched her golden crown of leaves and her crescent earrings. "Sida's work is superior to all others," she said, in an authoritative voice, then turned to her handmaiden. "Give him the contract tablet." The young woman handed Jomar a hard clay rectangle that was smaller than his palm and covered with evenly spaced markings. What was this tablet? He was uncertain what to do or say. "I think you have never seen the written word," Bitatis said coolly. Jomar nodded in baffled agreement. "You hold in your hands a record of my assignment to Sida," she said. "Take it to him. The temple keeps a duplicate tablet here." So that was why Sida had trusted him with the drinking straw. The tablet would be proof of his delivery to the high priestess. Jomar stared at the clay piece in his hand. Who made this? Then he worried that he shouldn't be asking Bitatis such a question, or any question. The high priestess gazed at him without expression. "There are special rooms in the temple where people called scribes do nothing but make records in clay and carve words on stone to honor our great moon god. The scribes know how to make these wedge-shaped marks and understand their meaning." Before he could silence himself, Jomar asked, "Can Sida read what I will bring to him?" Bitatis shook her head. "It takes many years of difficult study to learn to read and write. Those who can are often made priests of the temple." She sat up even straighter in her chair. "I'm one of the few women who have mastered the discipline." "You can read this?" Jomar blurted. The half-smile on Bitatis's lips held both pride and scorn. "My older brother received instruction in how to read and write, but he failed to learn. I pleaded to take his place and was finally allowed to do so." She raised her chin. "I dedicated myself to the task and achieved great success." Jomar was awestruck by this forceful woman, but he knew he should leave. Sida had told him to show the high priestess courtesy in word and gesture. "You have been kind," Jomar said, bowing low to her. Bitatis stared at Jomar with intense black eyes made even more striking by their thick black outline. She dismissed him with a nod. Jomar left her chambers and walked back through the temple. Before this he had seen only graceful rhythmic designs on the base of stone statues of bearded gods, on huge urns, on walls and columns. Now he knew that these marks were words that had meaning to those who could read them. Chapter 17. Innocent? Jomar hurried back to tell Sida about his meeting with the high priestess, but he was annoyed to find Gamil leaning against the wall of his house as if waiting for him. "Here again?" Jomar asked. "Don't you have work to do?" "I work with my father, helping to load and unload the donkeys that merchants send out on trading trips," Gamil answered. "When my father goes on such a journey, I must stay behind to care for my sick mother." Jomar's cheeks burned in embarrassment for his rudeness. "I'm sorry for your troubles," he said quietly, then turned away to enter Sida's house. "No, stay for a moment," Gamil said. "What's your name? Are you from the city? Who is the young girl I see leaving and entering the goldsmith's house?" "My name is Jomar. I'm from the country, and the girl you see is my sister. Sida is waiting for me." He left before Gamil could ask any more questions. On entering the house, Jomar heard the sweet sounds of Zepha singing above the humming strings of the great lyre. Unaware of Jomar's presence, Nari sat at the kitchen table, listening intently. Was she even breathing? Suddenly she put her hands over her face and quietly wept, her shoulders shaking with her muffled sobs. Jomar cleared his throat to let her know she was not alone. Startled with surprise, Nari struggled to control her tears. Without acknowledging his presence, she rose from the table and busied herself with shelling peas. Jomar quickly left her to enter the workroom. Sida sat listening to Zepha with his eyes closed. After she stopped singing, Zepha strummed the lyre for a moment more, then quieted the strings with the palms of her hands. "It must be difficult playing on a lyre of this size, but the sounds you make are beautiful. I will remember your music as I work on the lyre," Sida said in a gentle voice. With a radiant face, Zepha bowed and left the workroom. When Sida looked up and saw Jomar, His expression changed. "How can I be so moved by the music of a child who steals from me?" He made a curt, dismissive gesture with his hand. "I'll deal with that when the lyre's completed." "Thank you for letting Zephyr stay until then," Jomar murmured. Sita ignored his thanks. "I followed you to the temple to make certain you would make the delivery. Who was that man I saw you talking to near the back entrance?" Jomar sucked in his breath. He'd been followed. He couldn't risk telling Sita about Malak. If he knew of Zephyr's enslavement and Malak's threat to find her, Zephyr would be expelled from the goldsmith's house instantly, and he would be forced to go with her. "He was a man we met on our journey to he said. "I've told you, don't trust strangers," Sita said, then dropped the subject. "How did the high priestess receive the drinking straw?" Jomar smiled. "She believes your work is the finest of all the temple goldsmiths." Relief flooded Sita's face. "It's important that Bitatis thinks well of my skills. I was told she was angry when I refused to embellish the lyre after Aban's death." Jomar handed the magical clay tablet to Sita. "The high priestess told me that these marks are all about the golden straw. She knows how to read them, but I don't understand how such information can be captured by just these scratches on this little piece of clay." "Ah, Bitatis tells everyone that she's one of the few women who can read and write," Sita said. "I can't make out these scratches, as you call them, but they're a record of my commission to create the drinking straw." Sita studied the tablet for a moment before carefully putting it in a basket filled with many others. "No mere human could have invented writing. It's a gift from the gods." "The jewelry you made for the high priestess is beautiful," Jomar said. "Do you think your talent is a gift from the gods as well?" "No," Sita said decisively. "My talent is based on years of hard work." "I know nothing but farming," Jomar said in a subdued tone. "Will I ever be able to create such fine pieces?" "It will take a long time to determine whether you can or not," Sita said. A long time, with no certain results. A wave of yearning for his parents and life on the farm swept over Jomar. He missed his mother's smile. He missed poling his boat on the misty marsh lake in the early morning. And he missed the feel of the wet, slippery skin of a newborn calf. "Do you know where Zephyr went?" Jomar asked with a heavy heart. "I must speak with her." Sita's eyes narrowed. "Yes, you must talk to her. About the missing bead." Jomar nodded, but had trouble meeting Sita's steady gaze. "Nari put her to work washing clothes behind the house," Sita said. "I pulled her away to play for me, but I'm sure she's gone back to her chore." Jomar found his sister on her knees beside a large clay basin. When he approached her, Zephyr sat back on her heels, letting the wet clothes fall from her hands into the basin. She looked up at him with a smile on her flushed face. Jomar steeled his heart against her smile. "I've had no time to be alone with you since you played on the temple lyre. Zephyr, how could you have done such a foolish thing?" Her face fell. "I woke up in the middle of the night, uncomfortable where Nari told me to sleep. When I tried to find a better spot, I brushed up against something tall and heard deep sounds, mysterious sounds. I took off the covering and found a lyre larger than I had ever imagined." She closed her eyes and moved her fingers over invisible strings. "When I touched it, lovely low notes flowed out." For a moment Zephyr's dreamy expression made Jomar want to forget about the missing bead. But he must speak of it. "Zephyr, something serious has happened. Something valuable is missing from the workshop. When I was stringing a necklace this morning, I discovered that a lapis bead was gone. What do you know about this?" Her eyes were wide with surprise. "A bead? A blue bead? Missing?" "Yes, just one." "So you think because I played on the temple lyre that I'm a thief as well?" "You must tell me the truth," Jomar said, his voice rising. Did you take the bead?" "I'm your sister," Zephyr cried. "How can you think of that?" "You were alone in the workshop all night," Jomar said. "Perhaps you thought you could take the lapis bead and hide it somewhere." She sprang up and raced inside the house, returning with her reed basket. "Search it." Jomar hesitated. Zephyr looked at him defiantly and turned the basket upside down at his feet. He bent down and looked at the meager belongings strewn on the ground, gently touching the little lyre to be sure it wasn't broken. "All right, it's not here," Jomar said. "But if you took it, perhaps to give it to Mother some day, You must return it." "I can't return something I don't have." Jomar was shaken by her righteous anger, but he forced himself to speak in a low, flat voice. "If I find the bead on the tray tomorrow morning, I'll forgive you and try to understand." "Forgive me? For what? And how could you understand anything that has to do with me?" Zepha's voice rose. "Your only concern is that I should obey Nari's orders and not cause trouble. But you belong here. While I'm that woman's servant, you're learning the skills of a goldsmith." Jomar had no answer to her outburst, because what Zepha said was true. Zepha glared at him defiantly, then returned to scrubbing the wet clothes. She did not look up again. In the hot glare of the sun his sister looked young and vulnerable. But was she innocent? Jomar gazed down at her thin shoulders and reached out to touch her. He withdrew his hand, knowing that she would angrily brush it off. Instead of protecting Zepha, he had become her enemy, her accuser. And there was the threat of Malak. Jomar could not bring himself to tell her of his meeting with him and have her live in terror of his return. Jomar's strength was disappearing. He could not make her confess she'd taken the bead. He did not know how to shield her from Malak. And we will end there for now. Hopefully I'll have time to record some more soon. And I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.